This is Azure Striker Gunvolt 3, and these games are always a good time, and in this case they've actually changed the whole formula around quite a bit. So what exactly are these games? Well, they are 2D side-scrollers, and they tend to be quite skill-based as well. Not necessarily extremely difficult, but with a pretty good depth of mechanics and a lot of skill required to master them, and this game is no different in that respect. I'm really not very good at it, to be honest. The footage in the background is me trying my best, but after my first playthrough of the whole game, I managed entirely B's and A's in terms of stage rankings, which goes up to S++, by the way. So yeah, I've still got a ways to go in terms of mastering this game, but it is a very enjoyable and rewarding time to do so. Now, the closest thing I can think of personally as to comparing this game to something else to help you understand how it plays would be the Megaman Zero games. It actually plays pretty similarly to those and even shares some of the same ideas, like for instance the idea that of course you choose a boss and then fight through their stage, and it's sort of non-linear in the fact that you usually have several to choose from at a time, although there are also some linear segments of levels that you have to do in a specific order in between having multiple choices. It's sort of a hybrid setup going on here, but also there's the fact that beating certain bosses gives you new sword techniques to use, which is very Mega Man Zero, and using them effectively is key to actually mastering this game's mechanics. But I will say the game itself is actually nowhere near as difficult as a Mega Man Zero game is. The difficulty in this game is really interesting because the actual just surviving a level and getting to the end and beating the boss, like basic gameplay difficulty, is not very high. It's actually a relatively easy game to get through. Although the last couple of bosses are noticeably more difficult, they're still not crazy hard. In fact, my first playthrough of the game, I never actually lost. I never died and had to restart or anything. I was able to always beat levels my first time through. But like I said, I only got B's and A's, so that's the interesting thing about the difficulty. The base difficulty is pretty easy, but the game has a very high skill ceiling when it comes to mastering its mechanics. So although you'll be able to survive the levels and just get through the story without all that much difficulty, actually getting really high grades in all the levels is much harder. So the way that it works is you're actually playing two different characters that you can switch between. You're playing Kieran and the titular Gunvolt, although he is more of a special form kind of idea, rather than a full-on character in this game, which is interesting considering he's still in the title. But yeah, so the way that you play Kieran, your main character, is, well, you got a sword, and you can smack people with it, and it does damage, but you don't actually tend to use just the sword to kill things. Instead, you press the X button to throw out these talismans, and talismans mark enemies and actually fill their health gauge up with purple. And the talismans themselves don't do any damage when they land, but when you smack them with your sword after they have a talisman on them, that purple segment will be all the damage that your sword will deal all in one blow, which means if you hit an enemy with enough talismans, you can one-shot them. And using this technique, you can one-shot every single enemy that's not a boss in this game, as long as you pin them with enough talismans first. So the combat in this game is actually not focused purely on swordplay, but rather a combination of these ranged attacks that don't do damage but set up your sword to hit really hard. So you're going around zipping through the screen, marking enemies with these talismans and killing them all in one blow. That's how you actually traverse the level successfully. But you don't just have the standard mark and attack, you also have this homing slash on the B button that is absolutely key to playing the game, because this will teleport you to every enemy that's marked and cause you to slash them. And if you have, say, 5 enemies marked and they all have all their health gauge marked as purple, that means you will insta-kill all 5 of them in one swift blow. Now, Kieran only has the single jump, although she does have a Mega Man-style wall jump and a dash, and including a dash jump as well, which is very Mega Man in how it works. It's exactly like you would think. However, whenever you use this homing slash and kill an enemy with it, you get one air jump every time you use it, and it refreshes each time you mark and homing slash an enemy. This means that very skilled players never have to touch the ground in this game, and that's not hyperbole. In fact, that's how you get an S++ rank, is to make it so where basically after you start a mission, you never land until the very end. And that's actually possible. All of the levels are set up to where once you have good knowledge, a good understanding of how the level structure works, you can do this. You can actually dash through the whole level, slashing everything in the air, and keep up one continuous string combo all the way through and never touch the ground until the end. And it's really impressive to actually watch people do that, and I am nowhere near good enough at this game to be able to do that. I have some sections, there are some sections I've memorized down to the point where I can actually dash through them all, homing, slashing all the way through and never actually touch the ground, but we're talking like, 10 or 15 second segments of a level, not keeping up a combo for the entire level. I'm not that good yet. And that's why I say the game's difficulty is interesting, because, just surviving till the end isn't hard, but nailing all of this timing and dashing and marking and stuff and making it to where you're never touching the ground, that's really challenging, and it's actually a very difficult thing to keep up this continuous aerial combo, but you can do it. You also have a sort of super attack on the Y button that clears the whole screen and or does a ton of damage to bosses, but it is on quite a long cooldown, so you absolutely cannot spam it. And I'm also guessing if you want the highest scores possible to get really high ratings, you probably shouldn't use it, because actually marking and slashing enemies will give you significantly more score than using this big super attack does. But in addition to this, you also have that purple chain-looking gauge beneath your health gauge at the top of the screen. That's your Fetters gauge. It's represented as a percentage, and if it's at least 100%, you can hold a button down to switch over to Gunvolt instead. Gunvolt is much stronger than Kieran, and also very fast, and has some pretty significant mobility, but he's limited by this gauge. Once this gauge runs out, everything he does, by the way, will empty this gauge in different amounts. Once it runs out, you are forced to switch back, so it's more like a super mode than a traditional character change. As Gunvolt, you will fire needles out at people that do very little damage, but mark them in a similar way to the way the talismans do, and once the character is marked, you can hold the right trigger down and you will fire out a constant storm of homing lightning bolts on every enemy on the screen that happens to be marked by your needles, and you can mark an enemy up to 3 times, each one increasing the damage per second your lightning does per mark. And this means that you are extremely powerful as Gunvolt and can clear the entire screen very easily. When you're not firing, you also have this sort of static shield surrounding you that will block projectiles, but when you are firing, the shield goes away, so you do have to time your salvos to be in between enemy attacks if you're not sure you can dodge them. He also has an infinite jump, by the way, and can still move while firing all these projectiles, so you gotta make use of his mobility to keep him active for as long as possible. And also, he has a dash attack that has the negative of course, making you really close to an enemy, so it's possible that you could get hit, but the risk-reward is if you dash through a marked enemy, you do a ton of damage to them with these homing bolts that don't take nearly as much of your gauge as your traditional storm of lightning does. And if an enemy is marked with all 3 needles, then you will do a special insta-kill attack to them, and this can even be done to larger elite enemies and bosses, although you can't necessarily do it to any boss from full health. Generally speaking, they have a certain threshold at which they become insta-killable, but if you're able to time your dash just right and sort of soften them up first, you can in fact insta-kill bosses this way, and the animations are usually really satisfying when you do. He also has a super powerful special attack on Y that tends to clear the screen, but its power is determined by the amount of gauge you had when you first switch to him, not when you use it, because it actually uses all of the current gauge and will automatically transform you back to Kieran after you use it. So you're encouraged to switch to Gunvolt when you have a whole bunch of gauge to make this attack really strong, and then only use it when you're just about to run out and switch back anyway. As Kieran, you also have these things called image pulses, which are new to this particular sequel, and these are passive and active effects that you can earn from finding collectibles in levels, and depending on the number you find, you will earn different amounts of these guys every time you beat a mission, and every mission has a different list of possible images that you can find. The passive ones are equipped to these passive slots that you have. You only start with 3 of them, but as you kill enemies, you'll level up, and leveling up increases your health, but it also increases over time the number of passive slots you have to equip these, and these tend to be very useful. Anything from causing money pickups to actually restore a small amount of health when you get them, or increasing the height of your jump, making you a little bit more mobile, stuff like that. But the one you'll start with is actually one of Gunvolt's himself, and it's his ability called Prevasion, and this is a main game mechanic that you can actually turn off, which is interesting, simply by unequipping this passive if you don't want it. If you do have it, this means that whenever you take a hit from an enemy, it will instead cause you to sort of fade out and not take any damage, but it will remove some of your talismans, and you have to actually double tap down to reload your talismans back to maximum. So if you're not careful, you can actually completely run out of talismans this way. Normally they simply regenerate themselves after you use them, but in the case of using this Prevasion ability, it means that you can avoid damage to your health gauge by instead reducing the maximum number of talismans you have temporarily and forcing you to reload them in battle consistently to actually stay competitive with damage. So I think it's cool that this is a useful mechanic that you can also just straight up turn off if you don't want it, and it's neat that it gives you the option to do so. And then of course there are also the active image pulses. Of these you can only equip 4 of at any given time, no matter what your level is, and they're bound to the right stick. Flicking the right stick up, down, left, and right will summon the active image pulse in that slot. And these are represented by various characters from this game and from past Gunvolt games, and you basically summon them up to do some sort of special attack or a big heal or a buff or something like that. They tend to be really useful, but they are also on quite long cooldowns, so they're not spammable, but using them at the right time can be very helpful, and they also have a very Mega Man aspect to them in that certain bosses are actually weak to certain image pulses, and if you get them in the right order, you can actually fight bosses with their weaknesses and then kill them a lot easier. But what I really like about all this is, despite the extra stuff on top of it all, you know, all the passives and the active skills and all that stuff, despite all of that, the base gameplay of just you, your sword, and your talismans remains pretty much the same the whole time, barring those extra attacks that you get for beating certain bosses. And this means that pretty much no matter what sort of build you're equipped with or what specifically you want to bring into battle with you, the main gameplay itself is always the same. You always have the same amount of mobility, the same basic attacks, and the same ability to dash, homing, slice everything on screen and stuff like that. You always have all that stuff as a standby, so that means that you can always get used to it being there as part of the main gameplay. You don't have to be equipped with special things to make yourself stronger. You're just really powerful as it is, and those things are more like garnishes. They're extra bits that are useful, but that you don't actually need, because the base gameplay itself is this really satisfying, high-skill, dash, never touch the ground kind of thing that you're capable of from the very start. The boss fights are definitely high points for me for the combat because they're really good tests of the things you learned throughout their levels, as a boss in a game like this should be, but they're also just like three-phase, really fun, complex patterns and stuff. They're just really good bosses that are well designed and have a lot of interesting mechanics to them that make them all memorable fights, and the fact that you will actually be fighting several of them multiple times, each with increased intensity in their attacks and stuff, helps you to sort of start to identify them by their signature characteristics, and it makes fights with them really enjoyable in my opinion. The last couple of fights in the game are really quite challenging. Honestly, they are significantly harder than anything that came before, but all of the bosses in this game are fun. The music is also something to consider. The music is really good. It's got a lot of really nice songs depending on the stage you're in. I definitely like a lot of the music, but the cool thing is, the better you do, you actually get more music. Once you get to a certain level of combo, a certain sort of score in a level, one of the characters that's with you will actually start singing, and the song is different depending on certain things. You can actually equip image pulses to them as well and change their song in different ways, which you'll only get later on. But this means that you actually get rewarded for doing well, so you get extra good music if you're dashing through the air and never touching the ground, which is super cool. And there are even some buffs that are associated with this song, so that if you can keep your score really high, you can actually get some continuous benefits from it too, not just the music being better. So this is one of those kinds of games where, although the very first playthrough isn't going to take you very long, mine took about 5 hours, there's a lot of replay value and a lot of other stuff after the fact to do, because you've got all these image pulses to collect, you've got the mastery of the levels to do so that you can actually get really high grades on them, and you've got some other extra stuff that I don't want to spoil. So there's actually quite a bit to enjoy here, and I think it's very much worth the price for a really, really solid Megaman Zero style skill-based platformer. You just don't see games very often with this kind of very high skill ceiling platformer gameplay that aren't like crushingly difficult from the beginning, like Celeste for instance. This is a different style where the game itself isn't that difficult, but its mechanics have such depth to them that you can spend a really long time learning them inside and out and get really, really good at them. And I just think that sort of thing is really fun. So yeah, I definitely recommend this one. Really solid gameplay loop, really nice art, great music. It's just the full package and is a very enjoyable time all the way through. So thank you guys very much for watching. I will, as always, link you in the description below this video to the Steam store page for this game, and I'll see you guys next time.